What kind of secrets lie hidden beneath the roaring waters of Niagara Falls? On a cold November morning in 1923, the corpse found inside a barrel at the bottom of this natural wonder would mark the beginning of one of the most ruthless revenge stories of the Prohibition era. Tony the Whisper Romano, this man from inside the Magaddino gang, was the sole witness to what happened that night, and what he saw would change him forever.
My name is Tony Romano, but the streets know me as the Whisper. I earned this nickname not because my voice always comes out low, but because I carry secrets in whispers. In November 1923, I was part of Stefano Magaddino's gang in Buffalo, and at that time I was still in my early 20s. Throughout my life, I've seen many things, but what happened that night at Niagara Falls was the event that burned into my soul and eventually drove me to cooperate with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The city of Buffalo was boiling with smuggling activities brought by the Prohibition ban in those years. Thanks to our proximity to the Canadian border, we had become an important center for alcohol smuggling. Boats coming over Lake Erie carried tons of contraband liquor in the darkness of night. The city's harbor was a complex place where legal fishing boats mixed with illegal cargo ships. Different sounds rose from the docks every night, sometimes gunshots, sometimes the outbreak of fights were heard. Stefano Magaddino was one of the men who took full advantage of this opportunity. After coming from Sicily to the United States, he had established a powerful criminal empire in Buffalo. The territories under his control extended from the city's Italian neighborhoods to the shores of Lake Erie. Every speakeasy, every smuggler, every street vendor had to get his permission. I was also a small cog in this empire. But the weight of what I saw and experienced was felt more and more on my shoulders with each passing day. That November, tensions had increased in the territories controlled by our gang. A man named Giuseppe Joe Ventola was selling alcohol without permission in our territory. Joe was a middle-aged, dark-skinned Italian. He had come from the Palermo region of Sicily and was trying to establish a new life in America. But unfortunately, he had collaborated with the wrong people. He had connections with a rival gang, the Albanian gang, and was selling their alcohol in territories we controlled. Magaddino had taken this situation as a personal insult. According to Sicilian tradition, territory violation is paid with blood, and this payment would be made in a way that would set an example, by Stefano's order. It was decided that Joe Ventola would be eliminated, and this would be done in a way that would be a lesson to everyone. That cold November night, we gathered in a warehouse on the east side of Buffalo. The warehouse was an old furniture workshop, and inside it smelled of dust and humidity. Wooden beams creaked above us, and the Lake Erie wind from outside was battering the building's roof. The shadows of old tools danced on the walls, and cobwebs hung in the corners. Scattered sawdust pieces on the floor muffled our footsteps. The cold inside the warehouse penetrated to the bones, and steam came out when we breathed. Stefano Magaddino wasn't there, of course. He never personally did such dirty work, conveying his orders only through his trusted men. For him, this was just a work order, but for us it was a matter of life and death. Because if this operation failed, not only Joe Ventola, but our end would come too. The person in charge of carrying out the operation was Salvatore Sal Carollo. Sal was one of Magaddino's right-hand men. He was a powerfully built man in his early 40s. His hair had grayed early, and his face bore the traces of countless fights. He was one of the men who brought the Cosa Nostra tradition from Sicily to American soil, and he did his job with great seriousness. With us was also Vincenzo "Vinny" Torino. Vinny was my age, but much more ruthless. Born and raised in Buffalo's Little Italy neighborhood, he knew the streets very well. Despite being skinny, there was nothing he couldn't do with a knife in his hand. That night, there was a different sparkle in his eyes than usual, as if the moment he had been waiting for had finally come. When Sal explained the plan to us, my heart started beating fast. Joe Ventola would be kidnapped that night after leaving the speakeasy on Elm Street. We would take him to Niagara Falls, execute him there, and throw his body in a barrel from the falls. This was a revenge method that had become the signature move of the Magaddino gang. It was a perfect way to intimidate rivals. When we arrived at Elm Street around 10 at night, the streets were deserted. The cold of November was penetrating to the bones, and occasionally falling snowflakes danced under the street lamps. While waiting at the door of the speakeasy, jazz music and laughter sounds coming from inside reached our ears. In those days, these secret drinking establishments were proof that life continued despite the Prohibition ban. When Joe Ventola came out of the speakeasy, he was wearing a dark coat and was a little drunk. He was a medium-height, stocky man. He was swaying slightly as he walked, humming Italian songs to himself. His coat was covered with snowflakes, and his breath came out as steam in the cold air. His leather shoes made noise on the wet pavement. Maybe he was happy for the last time, because he didn't know that everything would end soon. At that moment he was only thinking about going home, getting into his warm bed. Vinny and I approached him from behind. Sal was coming from the front. When Joe noticed us, it was already too late. Vinny quickly went behind him and covered his mouth, while I held his arms. Sal whispered to Joe, "If you come quietly, you won't get hurt." But of course we both knew this was a lie. We put him in the waiting car. The black 1920 model Ford was one of the gang's favorite vehicles at the time. Sal got behind the wheel, I sat in the front seat, and Vinny kept Joe under control in the back. The road from Buffalo to Niagara Falls was completely empty at that hour. The car's headlights illuminated the snowy road ahead, and the sound of the engine broke the silence of the night. Throughout the journey, Joe never spoke. He just took deep breaths from time to time and read his rosary with trembling hands. Maybe he was saying his last prayers. This scene aroused a strange feeling in me. This man was actually like us. He was someone who was looking for a better life in America, trying to support his family. But he had made wrong choices and would pay the price. When we arrived at Niagara Falls, the roar of the falls could be heard even from a distance. As that tremendous mass of water hurled thousands of gallons of water downward every second, the sound it made was like nature's own symphony. But that night, this sound sounded like a death march to our ears. We parked in the wooded area near the edge of the falls. This area was not as developed then as it is now. There were no tourist facilities, just wild nature. The sparkling waters of the falls could be seen through the trees, and the moisture rising from below made the air cold and wet, while the smell of pine trees filled our nostrils. The leaves under our feet rustled. In the distance, the hooting of owls could be heard, and occasionally the sound of breaking branches broke the silence of the night. The contrast between this natural beauty and the horrible deed we were about to do made my conscience ache. Niagara Falls was a life-giving power source that had been flowing for thousands of years, but now we were going to turn it into a grave. Sal took a barrel out of the car. This was a specially prepared barrel. Inside were metal pieces that would add weight to Joe's body. This way the corpse would sink to the bottom and perhaps never be found. But plans don't always go as desired. When we brought Joe next to the barrel, he now fully understood the situation. There was deep fear in his eyes, but at the same time, a kind of acceptance. Sal gave him the opportunity to say his last words. Joe muttered something in Italian, probably praying for his family. Sal wanted to get the job done quickly, because the longer we prolonged it, the greater our risk of getting caught. He shot Joe from behind with the gun in his hand. The sound was lost among the roar of the falls. Joe fell forward and stopped moving. Getting the body into the barrel was the hardest part. While Vinny and I lifted Joe's body, Sal was checking the surroundings. The barrel was quite narrow, and it took some effort to fit the body inside. During this time my hands were shaking, and my stomach was churning. I had seen violence before, but witnessing someone being killed so closely had a profound effect on me. After closing the barrel, we carried it to the edge of the falls. This was really dangerous. Walking on slippery rocks while carrying a heavy barrel in our hands was both physically and psychologically difficult. The water mist coming from below was hitting our faces, and the ground under our feet was becoming slippery. When we reached the very edge of the falls, we looked down. A tremendous mass of water was falling down with a terrifying roar. In the darkness of night, the white foam of the water presented a ghostly appearance. Faced with this scene, I felt how powerful nature was, how small humans remained. Sal pushed the barrel over the edge. The barrel hung in the air for a while, then mixed with the waters of the falls. It disappeared from sight within seconds, swallowed by that tremendous mass of water. At that moment, Joe Ventola's story had ended. But our story was just beginning. On the way back to Buffalo by car, nobody was talking. Each of us was busy with our own thoughts. I couldn't get what I experienced that night out of my head. The fear in Joe's eyes, his desperation in his last moments, the moment the barrel fell from the falls. All of these kept spinning in my mind. In the following days, conversations about Joe's disappearance began in the city. His family was looking for him, applying to the police. But of course there was no trace. The Magaddino gang had done its job well. At least that's what we thought. But a few weeks later, something unexpected happened. The barrel got stuck at the bottom of the falls, and the flow of water brought it back to the surface. A police officer from the Niagara Falls Police Department noticed the barrel during his routine patrol. After finding the body inside, the incident turned into a big scandal. The FBI immediately took action. At that time, federal agents were closely monitoring gangs that violated the Prohibition law. The Magaddino gang was also on their radar. The Joe Ventola murder became the excuse the FBI was looking for to take action against the gang. As the days passed, the net around us began to tighten. Gang members were being questioned one by one. Some were being arrested. FBI agents had begun to be seen everywhere in the city. The lights in the federal building were on until late at night, and meetings were constantly being held. While walking on the street, I was constantly looking back. I was afraid of every unfamiliar face. I was constantly living in fear, because I had witnessed that night. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. What if the FBI found me too? What if I had to talk? That's when I made the hardest decision of my life. I contacted the FBI. I especially met with an agent named James Morrison. Morrison was an experienced and understanding man. He gave me assurance and said that if I cooperated, I would be protected. I told the FBI what happened that night at Niagara Falls. I told everything in detail, the roles of Sal Carollo and Vinnie Torino, Magaddino's orders, everything. This was both relieving my conscience and saving my life.
Thanks to Tony the Whisper Romano's courageous testimony, this ruthless murder by the Magaddino gang was brought to light. This case, which was an important milestone in the FBI's fight against organized crime, once again revealed the dark face of the Prohibition era. The secret that Niagara Falls hid that night eventually led to the manifestation of justice. Sometimes the darkest moments witness the birth of the brightest hopes.